Hello, coaches! Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. Today, I'm chatting with Megan Holmstrom and Jordan Benedict. This is a very special episode beginning our short series on coaching in practice. We often get questions about what coaching looks like in practice, so we are excited to share this short series with you. Today, we're exploring the coaching relationship from both the coach and the coachee experience. Megan is an experienced instructional coach, and Jordan, now currently a coach, was her coachee when they both worked at the American School of Dubai. This spotlight focuses in on what their coaching relationship looked like in practice, and we hear how this felt from both Megan and Jordan's perspectives. The full-length audio podcast is a reflective and insightful look at how coaching is perceived by teachers, what coaches can and should do to build successful coaching relationships, and the long-term impact that coaching has on both the coach and the coachee. If you want an inside look that shares both perspectives, this conversation is a must listen. To hear the full episode, subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to let you know that registration for our 5th cohort of the Coach Microcredential is open now. We only open registration for this academic year-long program once a year, and now is your chance to join our next cohort. If you're curious about how you can coach better with 26 weeks of curated coaching content, a private mentor, and a cohort of coaches to learn with, stay tuned to the end of this video to hear more. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. I am super excited to be here with Jordan and Megan, and this is an amazing idea brought to us by Jordan, so I'm super excited to have this conversation. Megan was Jordan's coach when he was first teaching, and he suggested that why don't we have a conversation with the people's coach and their coachee and see how this relationship was so powerful in their professional practice. And brilliant idea. Here we are having this conversation. Before we get too much more into that actual conversation, I want to give both of you a chance to just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your education background, and then we'll get into your relationship as coach and coachee and kind of see that from both sides, which will be super cool. So I know many of our listeners already know Jordan, so I'll just start with him. And Jordan, tell us a little bit about your education experience and background.
Thanks, Kim. Excited to be here again too. I'm Jordan. I'm currently an instructional data coach at Shanghai American School. I started as a math teacher in the Middle East region and worked there for about 5 years, and then really started getting into data coaching towards the end through my relationship with Megan that you'll hear more about later. And then when I came over to Shanghai American, started as a math teacher and HOD, and kind of through my presentation and workshop work and around data coaching, transitioned into the role of instructional coach with a data emphasis now for the school. And so that's kind of where my head and heart is at now, is the same thing that I got benefited from by working with Megan is to coach others and to use some of my strengths to hopefully help other people move along their educational journey as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Megan, tell us a little bit about your education background and experience.
Great. So I have been in education for about 21 years, and I started as a classroom teacher, and I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I started with elementary grades 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I went into secondary and worked in middle school and really started to look closely at things I noticed about students in middle school and what I wondered about in regards to the connections of sort of their progression of learning from elementary on. So I went back to elementary school and was studying some practices around coaching leadership, and just sort of how we design lesson and instructional practices. So that led me into some leadership roles, most often starting with a math specialist role, and then just some really great work in Los Angeles Unified with a coaching cohort through the university. So we really looked at transforming instructional practice and overall math teaching and learning practices K-12. And then that led me on a path to do some work over the years with different schools. And Jordan and I connected while I was at the American School of Dubai in a full-time role as a K-8 teaching and learning coach. So that's where the work began. And then now I work with schools both domestically and internationally around that exact work. So I might partner with schools, excuse me, it might be a coaching model. It's definitely a partnership model to look at teachers' practice and the impact on student learning.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about how you work together. What was the process like? You talked about Megan coming in with that lens of working with you as a team lead and that being really helpful for you. So just tell us kind of like how it started, what it was like, and you told us a little bit about how she kind of won your trust, but like tell us a little bit more from your perspective how that kind of went down.
Yeah, so like Megan said, I had a supreme confidence in my content and in the metrics that I currently had at my disposal. And so when she would come in, I wasn't sure what she was looking for, what she was looking at. And I'd only ever previously had people enter my classroom for evaluation purpose, right? So actually somebody walking in for observation and for feedback for my own teaching was new to me. So I think that's where that kind of why I was feeling threatened as well. It was a new type of observation, right? And so she would script students for me, and she would talk to students and then ask me kind of like follow-up mediative questions or something like, how do you think so-and-so could engage with whatever, right? And would just get me thinking. And my initial reaction, of course, was always like, ugh, right? Like she's trying to lead me down. Like I could totally see the road she was trying to lead me down. Like it was not blind to it. And so I was getting a little bit frustrated with it. But I think what I appreciated about Megan is that she came in right away. You know, I think sometimes, and that was something I've taken with me as a coach is I know people are going to feel threatened. I'm going to reach out and go to classrooms anyway. And they might come afterwards and say, you know, I didn't like that you came into my room. But that's a conversation starter. And then I ask why, and then I ask more, and I'm like, what would you like? What would you prefer? And would it be helpful if? And so I so appreciated that she kept coming, and that she kept coming to other math classrooms as well. And we started having a holistic discussion. And maybe Megan will agree with this. I think myself, like a lot of other teachers, we just we believe in ourselves. But we also believe in perpetual growth, right? And so I started at some point to realize that thinking differently and with a partner could allow for personal growth. Otherwise, I was just going to be this teacher who had good reviews but taught the same way every year, and that just it's not who I wanted to be. And so, yeah, that just kind of like her perpetual persistence into my classroom and into my practice and feeding me resources and looking at things without asking me to change anything, that feeling of threat kept decreasing over time, because I realized in the end I had the choice if I was going to change or not. You know, at any time I could say, well, it's a great idea, and then I could throw it out, right? Like, but it took me a while to realize that I had that choice and it was non-evaluative. And I think once I kind of grasped that, then I was way more open to even like asking for things from her as well.
Okay, so you named a whole bunch of things I want to come back to. And I think that there are things that coaches listening to this can take away as like a little checklist, right? The first thing you said, that the fact that she came in right away and that she came back. So she may or may not have sensed a little bit of resistance on your part, but she didn't give up, right? She went straight in there and she kept coming back, and she was persistent in a way that was allowing you to think about new things without asking you to actually specifically do anything, which is the second part of what you talked about. She came into your classroom, she was feeding you resources, and she was looking at things without asking you to change anything specifically, but asking you questions to get you to think about what you were doing. So I think that, like, I don't know how many steps that was, but that was like, you know, coming in right away, persisting with the coming in, sharing resources, looking at things, and maybe you mentioned scripting too, scripting what students are saying, maybe even scripting what you were saying, and like giving you data going on, what was going on in your actual classroom, and then just asking you some mediative questions without making, even though she was subtly, you knew she wanted you to think about things in a certain way. She wasn't like telling you to do anything. It was just getting you to think about it. And so that right there is like a nice summary of the art of coaching, right? Like she didn't lose faith, but she also didn't put all the pressure back on you.
Right. But I'm also curious, Megan, like you must have noticed that as you're feeding me stuff that it took months for things to change. And so I'm wondering like if you had ever felt like I'm giving him this data, I'm showing him these things, but there's no movement going on. Because I know it took me at least a year before I really started moving.
Yeah, I think, I just wasn't, I wanted to make sure I was able to respond verbally. I think it's so interesting. While we're talking, I'm just pulling up my old files to see when I scripted, which year I scripted. It's interesting to hear from Jordan. It's interesting to hear from that perspective that you thought it took, that I might've been thinking it's taken a long time. I didn't think that at all. Perhaps because I'd come out of coaching K-12 and I had some experiences and was really looking at, how do you push teachers along without feeling like you're looking for an immediate step change. Like in my practice, there would never be like a due date. There would never be like is this happening? And one of the things is I looked back and I looked at some of my prompting questions that I posed, and they were very open. They were things like, here's the observation of the ways in which students might have been engaged. Here's the teacher move that might have happened to lead to that engagement. And then in the reflection space, I would pose questions like, how can we change the problem to promote deeper explanation and show understanding? Or is there a time for students to explain deeper, why does the area of a triangle work? What do we know about it? Even if only for discussion. So I would pose these little like thought prompts, but they definitely weren't checks or measures. So I don't think that it was that I looked for, is this taking, how much time is it going to take a teacher to shift, or will he do this the next time? It was that I was holding these very, very general, but really impactful practices in my head. So I was just looking for change over time. And I think that was reasonable for year one of our relationship, because that's what the school was in a space of thinking about, is how do we develop these partnerships so that teachers are just in this reflective loop of, oh, that worked, I'm going to try that again. Will you give me some feedback on, or will you watch for these students too? And I think that's where my head was. It was more around, let's see what this looks like the next time I'm in. And we were also, to be fair, we were also, as a school, playing with some of the frames of what coaching could look like. Do we do it as a sort of a lab site study over time? Do we do it as a cohort of the middle school team? Do we do it in blocks where teachers with similar teaching and learning questions are grouped together? And we played with all of those things. So an interesting point, though, Kim, that I think you brought up in your prompt, something was said about, reframing that Jordan wished, maybe that we had done this or that I had done this in a consistent way, and that was impactful to Jordan. And that was actually one of the biggest pieces of the qualitative data that our coaching sort of cohort came up with at the end of year one, is did we have impact and how could we measure it? And one of the things that was kind of our final statement of year one in reflection was, we should, based on teacher feedback, we should go in early and more often. That was a consistent theme that we got across the pre-K to grade 12 spectrum of coaching. So that's interesting that that's been highlighted, because that's exactly what we looked at as we were reflecting on year one.
I mean, I think that's what we hear from every time I have a conversation like this with classroom teachers. They're always like, please just come to my classroom. Like, I am so busy. I just don't have the time. You want to schedule these meetings. You want us to meet in like the coaching room and sit at the table where we have all these things. Please just come to my classroom. So it's like reiterated again and again. So it totally makes sense to me that would be the thing that like sticks out for Jordan, that you came to him and it was about you coming in and seeing what was going on in his classroom, and not about him actually having to do anything. And even hearing Jordan talk about how threatening just that is,
right?
I like, that's a thing for me as a coach. I'm like, oh, do I go in their classroom? Like, I don't want them to think I'm observing them and all these things. And so hearing how important that is, I think, is a really good reminder. I have two things I want to follow up on. I have a million things I want to follow up on, but two things I did want to share. One thing was listening to you, Megan, talk about helping teachers grow without a timeline or expectation, and kind of letting that happen organically without feeling like there is pressure, really connected for me in when we bring in opportunities for kids to reflect on their learning. and how organic that process is, and how that just takes a lot of questions over time. And maybe the first time you go into a classroom and ask a student, tell me a little bit more about what you're learning about. What, do you think this is important? What do you think we might be learning next? Like, just kind of like mediative questions for them. And the first time you do it, they like, what is happening here? I'm not normally asked to reflect on my thinking. I'm not asked to be metacognitive. So like having that same kind of mentality about when we work with teachers to build that kind of capacity for thinking, I think is a nice, easy shift for teachers who are becoming coaches. Like, oh, this is the same way I would think about building these skills with students. It's not a turn it around tomorrow, I can do it. It's a growth over time.
Yeah.
And then
I think that really speaks to the learning question focus that this particular school had. It was not, by the end of the year as a teacher, you can see and process, and I'm not the evaluator, I'm talking more about the systems of evaluation. You can see this happen because of this evidence and data, and then there would be a checkpoint. Yep, it's done. And what this school did was move to learning questions as a way to say, this is the work we're doing all the time. And you might not finish a learning question. It might just always be a learning question. In what ways are students engaged during open discussions, or in what ways do students reflect on their learning to summarize and close a session, whatever it might be. That actually was an entry point for us as a school, because we were in a standards-based system. So we were always looking at progressions of learning over time. And we really had a focus on teaching and learning. So that was something that really resonated, is we could talk about, this is just work we're committing to over time. So, targeting specific things weren't as important as looking at as Jordan has mentioned, the holistic practice, like looking at what are those things over time. And that's why I always say one of my broad questions is, who's doing the math? I'm always thinking about that question, and that can encompass so many things under it.
I think that is such a key point. Looking at the holistic practice and not the focus on targeting specific things. And I think that can get lost a lot of the time in coaching, especially when maybe not in international schools, but maybe more public school situation, when there are so many other issues going on in the classroom that you can't really even look at teacher practice because there's so many other things happening. So I really appreciate that more conceptual lens of coaching.
Thank you so much for watching this video today. If this was helpful for you in any way, please head over to our website for the Coach Microcredential. As coaches, we know we can always coach better. And this academic year-long program is an amazing opportunity to help you level up your coaching skills with the support of your own mentor. I know that I'm telling you that as the premium mentor for the coach, so it doesn't mean that much, but I'm going to let you hear from one of the coach participants right now so you can see why they think you should join the coach.
Hi, I'm Amy Garrett. I'm an EdTech coach at Hong Kong International School. I'm about halfway through the Coach Microcredential, and I have absolutely loved the content and the pacing of the program. I really love that I can work at my own speed and that I can be flexible with the deadlines and the work that's assigned. At the same time, I love the content. I think it's been extremely relevant to my role as a coach. It's been really helpful and instrumental in even guiding conversations that my school is having right now about our approach to coaching and our coaching philosophy as a school. One of the things I love most about the program is the personalized mentorship that I've gotten from Kim. It's been really great to have that one-on-one touch point of someone who has great insights and experience, but is also a great coach herself, just to walk through some of my thinking and some of the experiences that I'm having, and connecting the coursework to my actual day-to-day reality has been really, really rewarding. I'd say in a year where no one's able to travel to any conferences or PD, this has been an incredible blessing to be able to continue to engage professionally and to grow in this program. It's been the perfect timing, the perfect pacing, the perfect content, and I just really am glad that I signed up for it. I also have really enjoyed getting to know the cohort that I'm going through the program with. And so to network and to expand my own PLN through this program has been really great, as I've gotten to see how coaching works in other schools. And I've been able to empathize and sympathize and celebrate with other coaches who are going through similar challenges or seasons in their coaching team. Overall, I'm just really thankful I signed up for this program. I highly recommend the Coach Microcredential for any aspiring coaches or any coaches in their roles, particularly if you are working on developing your coaching skills or your coaching program at your school.
Are you ready to take your coaching skills to the next level? Join the next cohort of the Coach and make it happen.